Welcome to Nightique. I'm Edward St. Pé. Thanks for being a viewer of Nightique. And remember, we are archiving all of our shows at Nightique.com. We've got some of our interviews with the great Bobby Rush and other great artists from our area. Now, tonight we've got a state representative, Representative Cecil Brown. He's a Democrat here in the central area of Mississippi. We're going to talk to him about the new legislative season coming up next.
Since 1849, Carter Jewelers has been a part of Jackson's rich history. Over 163 years later, we've not only survived, Carter Jewelers has flourished. From generation to generation, we've established a tradition of excellence. Our reputation is built on customer satisfaction, service, and trust. Every piece of jewelry is handpicked, so you know you're getting the best value.
Nobody says I do like we do at Carter Jewelers.
Come see us and be part of our history.
I'm Dr. Quinn, and I believe in the power of exercise. Many patients ask me if they're going to get high blood pressure or diabetes because their parents had these conditions. I tell them that we cannot control our genetics, but we can control our diet and level of exercise. Practicing healthy decisions result in a better outcome. I'm Dr. Quinn, and I want you to remember that you have control.
Welcome to the show. We've got Representative Cecil Brown with us. Representative, thank you for being with us.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. So you at the legislature are in session.
We are in session.
What is, what's the big news coming out of this session?
Well, so far the big news has been focused really on education issues. There are two things going on. One is a funding issue. There's a constitutional amendment, proposed constitutional amendment pending, and we've had some discussion and action on that. There's also been discussion on Common Core, the new education standards that Mississippi, along with most other states, have adopted. So those two things have sort of dominated the early proceeding.
Is Common Core going to become a fact here in Mississippi?
Unless the law changes, it is. Now, right now, under our state law, the State Board of Education has the authority to set standards. The State Board of Education of Mississippi has adopted Common Core as the standards for the state of Mississippi. We haven't done anything to change that. Those are the standards. What we did yesterday in the House, and this is not passed the Senate yet, but in the House, we changed the name of it from Common Core to the Mississippi Curriculum Standards, but it's still Common Core.
What does Common Core mean in practical terms?
Common Core is a set of standards that were designed in response to an agreement among 48 of the 50 states, the National Governors Association, the Council of Chief State School Officers, which is like our state superintendent of education. Every state has one. They all agreed that they would get together and design a set of common standards. That's what the Common Core is. Common standards for every state to adopt in order to make sure that when we were looking at standardized test scores and that kind of stuff, that we would be able to compare what one child learned in one state with what another child learned in another state, and also that the standards would be raised at a level that would make us competitive with educational systems in the rest of the world. So that's what Common Core was. It's just a set of standards. Now below Common Core you have the curriculum, which is the way that states themselves and local school districts decide to teach the curriculum, what kids have to learn in order to reach those standards. So that's sort of the way it works.
Does it would seem that and this is a raising of the standards.
That's correct.
In the state. So you would think that this would be a good thing.
Well, it is a good thing, and I've not heard anybody say in any state that we need to lower standards.
Right.
What some states have said is we don't like a national standard, we want to set our own standard. People in Mississippi need to have a Mississippi standard, people in New Jersey need to have a New Jersey standard, and as long as they're high, we want our own standards. There's a lot of confusion about that because in fact what happened was the way the Common Core standards were designed was all the states came together and every state that adopted Common Core had input into the standards. So in essence, we've had Mississippi input into the standards. So people are not against high standards. I think there is some confusion among some people as to where the standards came from. There's even been allegation that these are federal standards. The federal government had no input into the standards, none. The National Governors Association and the National Association of Chief State School Officers, all of which came out of the states, they're the ones that designed the Common Core standards, and it's the states themselves that have adopted Common Core, not the federal government.
Would the adoption of this type of universal standards, would that put Mississippi, for example, at some disadvantage in any way?
Well, hopefully not. I think our kids are as smart as kids across the United States. It just gives us the opportunity to compare ourselves with kids from all across the country, but also it raises the standards in Mississippi, puts more pressure on the educational system to raise the bar for all kids, and that means all teachers have got to learn a way to get to those higher standards.
I know you're a Democrat.
Correct.
I've read that there are some let's say the Lieutenant Governor is a Republican,
right,
and he is against Common Core. I think he was for Common Core. And I'm just curious, I mean, can you tell me why would what is the reason someone would be against Common Core if it's a raising of the standards for the kids from an educational standpoint? Why would anyone be against it? Is there some reason?
Well, you'd have to ask him his reason to change his mind. What he has said, as has our governor, they both said what they want to do is design Mississippi standards. They don't want to lower the standards. They've alleged that these standards came down from the federal government. That's just not true. It didn't come from the federal government. But that's the allegation they've made, that it came from the federal government, and they don't want the federal government designing our standards. So I don't know. They're talking about higher standards. They're talking about standards that are equally high as the Common Core standards. If that's their position, that's their position.
But why reinvent the wheel if it's already something that is in place around the country and created by educators?
Well, you have, and I'll make it clear, we've got plenty of Republicans that are in favor of Common Core.
Right.
In fact, the education chairman of the House has been very vocal that he favors Common Core. He doesn't want to change it, and we haven't done it. He hasn't brought out a bill in the House to delete Common Core or really affect Common Core in any way.
Is it going to become a reality, or will it become a political football and then get punted away?
It's already a reality. The State Board of Education, under our laws, the State Board of Education is the body that adopts standards. They have adopted the Common Core standards. So those are the standards as of today. That's what Mississippi is working toward, and that was phased in over a period of time. But the standards that we have in place today are the Common Core standards.
I see. So it's already a reality.
It's a reality, and what the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor have been talking about doing is passing some legislation to take that authority away from the State Board of Education. That's a bad idea. We don't need politics involved in setting academic standards. One of the reasons we have a State Board of Education, the State Superintendent of Education used to be a statewide elected official. That person was elected. That was a political office. In order to get the politics out of it as much as possible, the legislature and actually the people adopted a constitutional amendment to set up the state, what they call the Lay Board of Education, people appointed by the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker to the state board and the superintendent of education, to the State Board of Education, to set the standards, to try to get the politics out of it. We don't need politicians setting academic standards.
The educational community is in favor of Common Core?
It depends on who you talk to. The State Board of Education has been unanimous in favor of Common Core. The State Superintendent of Education has been unanimous in favor of Common Core. The State Superintendents Association has been in favor of Common Core. The State School Boards Association has been in favor, they're on record in favor of Common Core. You have some individual teachers and some individual educators who have great concerns about Common Core, not so much, I think, as the standards, but the way we get to the standards, the curriculum by which we get to the standards. And there's a lot of concern from all these people about the testing process. And that's where the focus really needs to be, on testing. And in fact, the State Board of Education, we've got it's fairly complicated as to which test we use, but the State Board of Education has already voted to change the testing. They agree that the test we originally adopted is not an appropriate test. We're going to use it for 1 year because they'd already contracted for it, but they're going to put out a request for proposals for a new testing scheme for the following year. So
why? What is wrong with the test?
You'd have to really ask the academics. You know, my wife's a teacher. She's concerned about the test. What they argue is the test does not test what we're teaching. That the test is not appropriately aligned to the curriculum and to the standards, and therefore when we teach kids to learn a certain way or to learn certain facts, for an example, that the test is not testing them on that. So, I mean, I'm not an expert on the test, but I hear that repeatedly from superintendents and teachers and experts, and really we're not the only state that has that problem. A number of states have already made the same decision that Mississippi has, that we're going to abandon that test.
What is the other big news coming out of this year's session?
Well, the other education part is the proposed constitutional amendment. There's a group called Better Schools, Better Jobs that has been working for a year to design a constitutional amendment that would require the legislature to fund education at an adequate level. It required that we get, I say they, because I was not directly involved in it, but that they get 120,000 signatures from registered voters across the state of Mississippi to put on a petition to put that referendum on the ballot during the 2015, this upcoming general elections in Mississippi. They got almost 200,000 signatures, so they met that hurdle. That proposed language will be on the ballot. Under our Constitution, the legislature has the option to look at alternative language. So the legislature, unfortunately, adopted alternative language, and what it means is when people go to vote in 2015, they're going to have two things to vote on. They're going to have to first decide whether they want to change the Constitution at all. They have to vote on that, and once they vote on that, they'll have to vote on the original language or vote on this alternative language. The original language, in my judgment, is much better. It's been given the seal of approval, if you will, by 200,000 people in Mississippi that signed off on it. It took almost a year working with this group to work with their attorneys to come up with language that they thought would accomplish their mission. And so that's going to be on the ballot, but it was a big legislative fight.
Well, okay, we're going to come back after this break, and we're going to continue our conversation with Representative Cecil Brown, so stay with us.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amanda Rice with Quinn Healthcare, and I believe in the power of exercise. Many patients ask me if they would develop high blood pressure or diabetes just because their parents did. I tell them that although we cannot change our genetics, we can control our diet and level of exercise. Simply making better choices can change your life. I'm Dr. Amanda Rice with Quinn Healthcare, and I want you to know that you are in control.
Welcome back to Nightique. I'm interviewing Representative Cecil Brown at our studio, and you know, we talked about the current session of the legislature. We're going to segue now into a little different topic: politics in general. It seems like there's so much acrimony, more so than ever before in politics, from the national level filtering on down to the recent Thad Cochran election campaign and all of that. Will we ever get to a point where politics are not so full of acrimony?
Well, ever is a long time. Will we ever get there? I don't know. You know, people in politics and really people that talk about issues that affect public policy have strong opinions about that. I mean, I have strong opinions about education, have strong opinions about what's good for the people of my district, the people of Mississippi, what I believe. There are people that believe a different way whose opinions are just as strong. And sometimes you get into these discussions about it and tempers flare and people get upset and start calling each other names and all that sort of stuff. That's very unfortunate. But I think it's probably always been that way. I've seen examples back, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, you had the similar kinds of things, and even some bad fist fights and stuff like that going on. So I don't know that it's anything any worse than it was a long time ago. It's certainly worse than it was when I first came to the legislature. It's worse now than it has been. Well, I say that. It has not been bad this year. Before the year's over, I hope it won't get any worse. I don't see any reason that it should, but we've had some rough times the last few years.
Right. There have been no fist fights, at least, I guess.
Not that I've seen.
But in other countries, it's not so rare to see that.
That's awful. They throw things at each other and hit each other with sticks and, all kinds of wild stuff. We have not had that, fortunately, yet.
Right. Here's a question. Something in the news right now. The Prime Minister of Israel is going to speak to Congress and bypass the President's the protocol, and come straight. What is your opinion of that?
Well, I heard driving over here, as a matter of fact, that some of the people in Israel are upset that our Congress is going to allow him to speak. They think that the United States Congress is interfering in their election process in Israel. So there's been a protocol there for a number of years that, as I understand it, our president does not visit with people who are involved in elections in other countries just prior to the election, which is what's happening now. And our Congress has said, well, we don't care what you do, we're going to do it anyway. I don't know. I don't know why they did that. Israel has been a long-term friend of the United States. Maybe they feel like they need to repair some of the problems we've had with Israel recently over Iran. You'd have to really talk to the president and talk to people in Congress. I always feel like, we make these judgments based on what we read in the newspaper about what the president's doing, what Congress is doing. We don't have all the information. There's no way. They've got smart people around them giving them advice. I don't know that they always make the right decision, and certainly don't always make the decision you or I might make, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. It means they've got more information than we've got, and all we can do is elect the best people we can elect and hope they do the best job they can possibly do.
What I'd be concerned about is security. If the protocol is such that a foreign dignitary, a president or prime minister is coming to this country, you would want to have the president on your side as far as national security and such in regards to the safety of that individual. If you bypass that, you might be bypassing certain protocols that would be, protective of the individual coming.
Yeah, I am very sure that the President of the United States, whether it would be this president or any other president, would get the best advice he or she could get before making that kind of decision, from security people to political people to policy people, the State Department and others, about what's in the best interest of the United States in terms of an issue like this.
Yeah, because in this particular case, the group is coming, but it's going through Boehner instead of going through the president. So you're missing the guy with the most power as far as taking care of the safety issues. I don't know. It just seems kind of strange to me.
Well, I've also got to believe that in the great scheme of the relationship between the United States and Israel, this is a blip. That this won't have any impact whatsoever. These folks are talking every day, several times a day.
It's kind of political, just a political thing.
It's a political deal, yeah.
It's an interesting thing. What about the presidential election coming up, the next cycle? What are your thoughts about that as far as who will run, for example, Republicans and Democrats?
I don't know on the Democratic side. Hillary Clinton obviously is making noise about it, and there's some push for some other folks who are looking at it, and there may be a dark horse out there, somebody that nobody's really talking about. Governor O'Malley from Maryland has been mentioned, very attractive candidate, not as well known as some of the others, but a really attractive person, smart guy, very successful, former mayor, successful governor, and as you know, most of the presidents have come from out of the states as a governor, so that's on the Democratic side. There's several candidates. On the Republican side, it sounds like it's going to be another free-for-all. When you start looking at all the names that have been mentioned, now I know it'll be pared down over time, but you've got some people from the private sector who are talking about it, who've never been in politics, talking about running for it on the Republican side, and you've got some governors. John Cecil was on the radio again this morning talking about whether or not he's thinking about it. He's clearly thinking about running from Ohio. So you've got a lot of Republican candidates who are clearly qualified to be president if they get elected.
You have Bush, you've got Romney,
You got
you've
Bush,
Perry
you got-
from Texas,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So there's, there's three that have been in the fray, who are back in the fray again, looks like.
Yeah, yeah, you got those back in there, and of course there's some people arguing that, well, we need some fresh faces, and Scott Walker has been talked about as being somebody who would be attractive, and again, Kasich, I wouldn't put it past John Kasich to be a serious candidate. I mean, he's from Ohio, he's been very successful as a governor up there. He's a very good campaigner. He's been in Congress, so I think if he decides to get into it, he'll be very competitive.
So, as a Democrat, what are your thoughts regarding Hillary Clinton running?
I think Hillary Clinton will be certainly is the front runner now. Will be the front runner. Age gets to be a question. Fresh face. I don't mean age in terms of age as that she's too old, because she's clearly not. I mean, John McCain ran when he was a lot older than she is, and George H.W. Bush. So you've had a lot of presidents, and Ronald Reagan, a lot older than she is. Age in terms of political age. She's been around a long time. She's been Secretary of State. She was the First Lady. So you wonder how that wears on the public after a while. Her face is not fresh anymore. But she's a good campaigner. She's really smart. She can raise money. And she's a tireless worker, and I thought she's a very good Secretary of State. So
She's got Bill Clinton with her too.
she got Bill Clinton, who's the best in our lifetime for sure.
Yeah, I would agree too.
Yeah, I mean, as a campaigner.
Yeah,
no matter what you thought about him as president, as an attractive individual, he's something.
Well, I know that I can remember, through his presidency, the economy was booming, and that's a fact.
Yeah.
And I know the economy has not been booming in more recent years, and so you have to look at that. I think that his policies evidently worked from that standpoint.
Yeah, you can make a persuasive case that having him in the White House with her would be a good deal to have.
As the lead advisor, I guess.
Right,
you'd say.
right.
What are your feelings about the Obama presidency?
I'm very happy with President Obama. I think he has faced a headwind unlike anything anybody in history has faced. He came in at a time when the economy was an absolute shambles. I remember sitting, our son lives in Chicago, and we were sitting in his living room watching as the economy melt down, and it was just awful. People were scared to death. Banks were in trouble, defaults on these mortgages. It was just horrible.
Horrible.
And he got us through that. He didn't get through by himself. Congress helped, and the Fed helped, and a lot of people helped, but we came through it. I think race has been a big problem for him in dealing with a lot of issues. I think there's been a lot of racial animosity against him by some people. Not everybody by any stretch of the imagination. He's had a lot of white support, but I think that's been an issue for some folks. And it's been very, very difficult. He's had some difficult issues to deal with. But I think overall, I'd give him a high grade for the way he's handled things.
Yeah, of course, it's assumed that Obama is black, but he's also half white too.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like he's a composite of America, in a way.
I'll tell you a funny story about that. A good friend of mine, who's in the legislature and remained nameless, was asked early on, "Are you going to vote for that black guy?" And he said, "Well, he's half white. I'm going to vote for the white half."
Yeah, the economy is doing better, and when he came into office, he inherited that disaster that we encountered.
Well, a disaster and a war. We were at war. We had
Lots
this
of
economic disaster. It was a terrible situation. Unemployment rate was through the roof. I mean, it was just terrible. And I don't give him full credit by himself for doing it, but he was the leader. He was the guy that was there. He's the people that calmed people down. He's the guy that came up with some of these fiscal stimulus policies that helped get us out of the mess.
It was on his watch that we got through it.
That's right.
And it seems like the economy is better and things are moving forward in a better direction.
I think so. It's everybody's not being pulled along. All the numbers show that the disparity has gotten wider in economic success. The income gap is wider. I mean, yeah, the income gap's wider, but most people are doing somewhat better than they were.
And people are more optimistic, I think.
Yeah, the numbers show that. The numbers show that again today. The indicators are better and people are feeling better, and his numbers have gone up as a result of this. It's kind of interesting to watch his numbers go up and down as the economy goes up and down.
Right, right. Well, Representative, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. I enjoyed the visit.
Representative Cecil Brown, thanks a lot, and we'll have you back again soon.
Good. I enjoyed it.
And thank you for watching the program tonight, Nightique, and we'll see you next time on Nightique.
Since 1849, Carter Jewelers has been a part of Jackson's rich history. Over 163 years later, we've not only survived, Carter Jewelers has flourished. From generation to generation, we've established a tradition of excellence. Our reputation is built on customer satisfaction, service, and trust. Every piece of jewelry is handpicked, so you know you're getting the best value.
Nobody says I do like we do at Carter Jewelers.
Come see us and be part of our history.
Well, thanks to Representative Cecil Brown for being with us tonight, and thank you for watching. Right now we're on in the Meridian Market on Cozy, CW Hattiesburg, Jackson, JSU TV, Comcast 14, and soon in Greenwood, Greenville. See you next time.